For 1 week every year, I get to travel back in time to an era when the West was really wild. I spend days on my horse, roping calves and heating branding irons. The only thing protecting my face from the blistering sun and blowing white sand is a cowboy hat and a tattered wild rack. In the evenings, meals are served on tin plates, while cowboys tell tall tales of their past adventures. Yes, when my dad and I travel to the desert of New Mexico for spring branding at the Far Ranch, I get a glimpse into the life of an early American cowboy. While I enjoy the nostalgic feeling of the Old West, the modern American cattle industry is far from traditional. To survive in today's multifaceted cattle business, a producer must navigate complex cattle markets, rising inflation, erratic weather conditions, supply chain issues, and changing consumer demand. Considering the fact that a single beef animal and its meat may be sold as many as 6 times before it reaches the consumer's plate, it is no surprise that cattlemen are analyzing the beef industry from multiple angles. Perhaps the most prominent issue the cattle industry currently faces is market consolidation. Today, only 4 companies, Cargill, Tyson Foods, JBS, and National Beef Packing, slaughter over 80% of U.S. beef. A current Department of Justice investigation is looking into claims that the 4 companies have been involved in market manipulation practices in order to keep live cattle prices low and box beef prices high. The DOJ has yet to publicly acknowledge the investigation, but documents have revealed that JBS settled with the government for $52.5 million in early 2022. The company admits no liability, yet states that settling was in the best interest of JBS. This silence from the DOJ is not sitting well with many cattle owners. According to Colin Whittle, CEO of the National Cattlemen's Beef Association, America's cattle producers expect and deserve full transparency on any and all information related to ongoing market investigations. Cattle producers do not have years to wait for the government to determine if there has been any wrongdoing. In September of 2022, the White House Competition Council announced new efforts by the United States Department of Agriculture to support fair and competitive beef markets. These modernized regulations, under the Packers and Stockyards Act, aim to provide clear, more effective standards in governing the modern marketplace. If implemented by the USDA, the proposed rules will identify unlawfully deceptive practices that violate the Packers and Stockyards Act with respect to contract formation, contract performance, contract termination, and contract refusal. While concerns about the cattle market may keep cattle producers up at night, drastic weather conditions often keep them busy during the day. Since the year 2000, the frequency and intensity of drought has grown in the United States. When pastures dry up and are not adequately meeting the nutritional requirements of cattle, producers must supplement their feed source. The cost of maintaining pastures and purchasing hay and nutrients can account for 30 to 75% of total costs on cow-calf operations. Not only can drought increase in producers' expenses, it can also stifle future profits. Each time there's a major drought, producers are forced to reduce their cattle inventory. Fewer cows and replacement heifers inevitably lead to smaller herd sizes. Once these cattle are sold, producers often struggle to replace them at comparable prices when pastures are lush. While a smaller cattle inventory may have been devastating to the U.S. beef industry in previous generations, today's producers have overcome lower numbers with higher efficiency. As a result of better genetics in the ranch and advancements in nutrition in the feedlot, the U.S. beef industry is producing more meat than ever before. According to Courtney Callett, senior economist at the Federal Reserve Bank of Kansas City, in fact, the number of pounds of beef produced per cow slaughtered has nearly doubled over the past 35 years. In addition to the price of cattle and the cost of drought, U.S. cattlemen must be constantly aware of consumer trends. Meat consumption in the United States has followed an interesting trajectory since the USDA began recording data. While beef consumption peaked in the 1970s and has remained relatively flat for 50 years, chicken and pork consumption has increased dramatically. In addition to the rise in chicken import, beef has to compete with the newly formed plant-based beef movement. Combine this competition with popular social campaigns to eat less beef in the name of climate change, and one might rationalize that beef consumption in the U.S. has peaked. Fortunately, a little deterrence has never been the spirit of the American calendar. In response to long-term pressure on beef consumption, industry leaders are pursuing a rising demand in international markets. As economies around the world grow in wealth, the demand for quality protein sources is on the rise, and that includes U.S. beef. An increase in U.S. beef exports has the potential to offset any losses that cattle experience in domestic consumption. U.S. beef exports were up 2% in 2022 compared to just 1 year ago, and this moment shows no signs of slowing down. While I always look forward to my week of living like a true American cowboy on the farm ranch, I would be lying if I didn't admit to enjoying the comforts we have at FFA. Likewise, technological advancements and the implementation of savvy business practices have allowed modern cattlemen to prosper, while still maintaining our cattlemen traditions. Through the modernization of cattle markets, improved genetics, and the exploration of new beef export opportunities, U.S. beef producers will continue to thrive in the face of environmental adversity and changing consumer base. We may no longer be battling the frontier of the Old West, but today's American cattlemen may just be the best of the West. Thank you.
Do you have any specific examples of unlawful deceptive practices that have occurred from the packing companies?
We actually have not seen the DOJ has a policy where unless it is dead set on a verdict on the program, they're not going to release information. It is alleged that maybe these packing companies have slowed the supply chain of the beef to make the meat. There's also been alleged that maybe they are importing live cattle from foreign countries and trying to flood the markets.
How much beef does the U.S. currently export, and who are our biggest export consumers?
We actually export $11.6 billion worth of beef and 493 million pounds of beef. Our top beef exporting countries are China, Japan, and Korea. We actually export $2.4 billion worth of beef to Japan and $2 billion worth of beef to China. What new exports markets that we're exploring is actually the National Cattlemen's Beef Association president is actually in Great Britain right now, trying to deal with maybe exporting some more beef to them after Brexit. They need a new beef export partner.
Talked about quite a few challenges and some opportunities as well. In your mind, what's the biggest challenge, and then how do you basically deal with it?
I think the biggest challenge in the beef industry is this market consolidation. And when I talk to Dr. Tim Starks, he states that these big four packing companies are going nowhere simply because of economies of scale. They can produce more beef faster and cheaper than any local packing plant. While everyone would like to say that they get their beef processed at, say, Sterling's local packing plant, you simply, on large-scale operations, to feed the United States, you cannot do that and be economically savvy. So what we're doing in steps to lessen the effects of market consolidation is steps toward price transparency. One thing that we're doing is on the Agricultural Marketing Service website, we have released a cattle contracts library where these big four packing plants and the feedlots that they're making alternative marketing agreements with can go in and they can put their data in this library for smaller cattle producers to go in there and breed, and that can benefit our livelihoods.
What effect will the current drought that our state is experiencing have on cattle prices in the near future and in the longer term?
The cattle prices are very, very good right now because, and everything is telling these producers to sell their cattle. So with high input costs and this current state of drought in Oklahoma, 53.7% of the state is in a drought. These producers are going to start selling their cattle at fast rates, which could cause our cattle prices to drop.
Well, thank you for taking on this, a very tough issue, and the cattle business is very large in Oklahoma and very important. And I appreciate all the research you've done. One of the things that you talked about was our ability to export beef to other countries in those growing markets around the world. But could you tell me about the imports that we're importing into the United States, and can you tell me how much we're importing?
We're actually ranked second in the world for beef imports, but only fourth in the world for beef exports. What we are doing is we can export our cuts of meat that maybe aren't in high demand in the United States, such as liver and tongue. We can export a beef tongue to Japan and get $10 for it, whereas when we sell it in the United States, it's maybe worth $2.50. And an Egyptian market is our biggest buyer of beef liver. What we're doing on the import side of things is we're importing grass-fed beef from Brazil and Australia and putting it into our fast food sector. So we might not have to cut up our great cuts of beef and put it into ground beef to be sold at fast food restaurants.
Turn on the tap and clean water rushes out as much as we want, anytime we want. Water has played a key role all throughout history. The civilizations that obtained it thrived, those that failed, fell. Water provides us with life, the ability to thrive, and luxury. Even with all the needs and wants water provides access to, safe water is finite. Water scarcity is the leading challenge of the 21st century. Globally, 884 million people do not have the pleasure to simply turn on a tap. The greatest threat to food security is water insecurity. Without water, agriculturists do not have the means to water their crops and therefore to provide food for the fast-growing population. Only about 1% of all the water on Earth is available for safe use. Nearly 2% is frozen in glaciers, which leaves a whopping 97% of all water as seawater. What if I told you there is a way to take all of that seawater, filter out the salt, and have a nearly unlimited supply of clean, drinkable water? This process is called desalination. With population growth and rise in income, there's an increasing concern of whether or not current available resources will meet future food demand. As global population peaks around 10 billion people by the year 2050, the need for fresh water for food is expected to increase by as much as 60%. In some regions like sub-Saharan Africa, where the population is expected to double within that same time frame, the need for increased crops and nutrient-dense foods, including milk, chicken, and beef, will more than double the need for water in regions already struggling with water scarcity. It is no secret that food production is the largest global consumer of fresh water worldwide, accounting for approximately 70% of all freshwater use. However, nothing has as much embedded water as meat. Alfalfa is a common ingredient in cattle feed, and growing just a mere kilogram of it takes 510 liters of water. The average cow eats 12 kilograms of feed a day. Divided up, just 1/4 pounder hamburger takes around 1,650 liters of water to produce. Statistics show that the world is eating more like Americans, with higher calorie diets, which means more meat. The truth is, everyone can't eat like Americans. There actually is not enough water on Earth to do so. As tensions rise over fresh water, governments are increasingly eyeing an idea that once seemed far-fetched. Today, there are two main types of desalination technologies: reverse osmosis and thermal desalination. Reverse osmosis uses the principle of osmosis to remove salt and other impurities by transferring water through a series of semi-permeable membranes. This water treatment process removes contaminants from water by using pressure to force water molecules through a semi-permeable membrane. The contaminants are filtered out and flushed away, leaving clean, delicious, drinkable water. On the other hand, thermal desalination mimics the natural process of the water cycle. Thermal desalination is a process that involves changing saline water into vapor. This vapor steam is generally free of the salt, minerals, and other contaminants that were once in saline water. When condensed, this vapor forms high purity distilled water. If you were to take a glass of water and pour salt into it, it would dissolve. If you were to watch microscopically while you did that, you would see that the water is actually breaking apart the salts into charged particles that chemically interact with the water, leaving salt water a new chemical solution, not just water with some salt grains floating around in it. And that is why desalination is a fundamentally tricky process. The cost of water is relatively cheap. So keep in fact that Mexico City, which half of the city's water supply comes from an underground aquifer that's being drained at an irreplaceable rate and predicted to run dry before the year 2050, loses over 50% of their drinking water due to leaky pipes. Arid Southern California uses over 2 trillion gallons of water a year to grow alfalfa, which they get from the Colorado River. The amount they pay for the water doesn't even cover the cost of delivery. In most places in the world, water is treated and priced like there will always be enough of it. This is why desalination is often looked at as a last resort. On average, desalinated water costs 2 times as much as imported water. But this is comparing apples and oranges. The imported water is coming from systems that were built half a century ago, with all the capital investment paid off. Turn on a tap, and just like that, we have water. It is easy to take things for granted when they come easy to us. The same can't be said for all. In 2018, Cape Town, South Africa was the first major city in the world to plan to shut off their water supply indefinitely. 4 million people would line up at the city water stations to get it, until they would run out. Day 0. The city was able to avoid day 0, but only through aggressive water conservation, and luckily it rained. It's not just Cape Town. Sao Paulo, Melbourne, London, Beijing, Bangalore, Tokyo, Barcelona, and Mexico City will all face their own day 0 unless their water use radically changes. Will we recognize this issue before it is in our own backyard? Water desalination may be key in preventing the United States from facing our own day 0. No, water desalination may not be the only answer to solve water scarcity. Although we can implement other strategies, such as water conservation, it is a step in the right direction. I believe in the future of agriculture and have no doubt that the agriculture industry will thrive in years to come. But let us not forget, our fate is tied to what comes out of our taps. Thank you.
For the first question.
Yes, ma'am.
What does it cost to produce desalination water, and are there any facilities being used now in the U.S.?
There are 2 aspects within that question I'm going to address of the cost of water desalination because it is not very monetarily effective sometimes. One, to implement a plant is going to cost at least $1 billion, and they're usually bonds passed by states and owned by local communities, especially for inland desalination plants. Not only is the initial cost for initial build-out going to be expensive for these desalination plants, the cost to run one is very expensive as well. You either have to use extreme amount of pressures, and that costs uses a lot of electricity, which would in turn cost a lot of money, or natural resources and gas, and that can also cost a lot of money too. And yes, there are current plants. There are about 2,000 of them in the United States. However, the largest area that holds the majority of these desalination plants will be in the Middle East, where they typically have a more arid, dry climate.
So are there, kind of following up that question, are there places internationally in other parts of the world that were effectively seeing large-scale desalination effectively used?
Yes, so the Middle East, like I mentioned in my previous question, is going to be the largest contributor to using desalination. Saudi Arabia, to be specific, that country has a lot of monetary means, which in turn allows them to have these desalination plants. Within the United States, we produce over 10 trillion gallons of water a year by desalination. On a global scale, 200 trillion. And so, I know that number sounds large, but it's less than 1% of the available fresh water we use. But it is being used today.
And are those examples that you mentioned being used in agriculture production or mostly for municipalities or other purposes?
These desalination plants are majority used for the public use. However, that in turn does help agriculture, especially with states like California. Although I know they are experiencing a flood right now, majority of the time they go through a lot of dry spells, especially states like Arizona and Nevada. And so if that allows more water to be used for the public, it allows for more water to be used in agriculture. And those states like water issues might not be a problem for much longer if this desalination is as sustainable as we think it can be.
Very good. My question is a little bit different. So we know the overall aquifer is lowering very quickly, and in some places, some of those irrigation wells, crops are drying up. Is there an answer in the oil and gas industry to be able to take the salt water produced from the oil and gas wells and be able to clean that water up and use that for crop irrigation?
Yes, this is a very good question because when doing research in desalination, yes, if the potential fresh water has about 25% if the contaminated water has at least 25% of potential fresh water, almost any type of liquid can go through that desalination process, including those natural gas resources. So that helps us build a more sustainable society as we can use that.
You talked about freeing up water through desalination. From an irrigation standpoint, what are the irrigation companies doing in terms of technology to help conserve the water we are using for agriculture?
Precision agriculture, I would say, is the #1 driver for agriculture is trying to conserve water. Precision agriculture essentially does away with the one-size-fits-all approach. A lot of times these technologies can water the plants that need watered and not the ones that don't.
Why do you think water, as you mentioned in your speech, is priced so cheaply as to encourage overuse?
Can you please repeat the question?
You mentioned in your speech how water is priced so cheap that people almost overuse it or don't respect it. Why do you think that is?
I think as Americans, we are very lucky to have one of the most abundant food and water supplies on a global scale. However, with that being said, if you're not living in the southwestern states, many of us are very oblivious to this issue. I simply had no idea how big the water scarcity issue was and that it was affecting the United States until researching this topic. And I think that is a simple answer to why the cost of water is so cheap. If the cost of water wasn't so cheap, then Mexico City probably wouldn't lose 50% of it due to leaky pipes. I think that the first reason as to why it's so cheap is because we take it for granted.
Taylor, you talked a little bit about where we're going with utilization of water, but are there going to have to be decisions down the road where maybe we don't grow a particular crop because it uses too much water?
I think that those kind of decisions can be important in the future, but I think there are steps we can take in order to prevent from having to choose between those types of crops. I think the old adage, an ounce prevention is worth a pound of cure, is one that's going to be holding true. Typically, farmers and ranchers set up their operations in drier areas. If you think about it, California is one of our major exports of fruits and vegetables. However, they don't get a lot of rainfall compared to some states. I think as we're moving into a more drier future, those agricultures will start setting up newer operations in those types of areas. And so if we do access the water we have now, conserve, and are smart about where we have our operations, we might not have to face that issue, but that is definitely something that can help. Thank you.
At a very young age, I was introduced to superheroes and supervillains. Some of my first childhood memories are the Friday evenings scenes in movies. Typically, my medieval self chose the same movies over and over again. My favorites. Every week, my family rotated who got to pick the movie that we would watch. Anyone who is 84 here has read a comic book, watched a movie, or at least seen an ad. By the age of 6 months old, the average not uncommon for boys to run around the park playground in Marvel or DC comic attire, supporting their favorite hero. Personally, my favorite superhero is Captain America. When the scientist Dr. Abraham Bernstein sees the potential in Steve Rogers, he takes a risk that changes the lives of millions. The agriculture industry needs to approach the rapidly changing technology of today with the same approach. You see, artificial mini chromosomes are the hidden superhero of agriculture. Just like Captain America, mini chromosomes are highly specialized and developed in a lab with the brightest scientists in the biotech industry. The information around genetically altered products is often misconstrued. Here's the difference. A genetically modified organism, more commonly known as a GMO, yields the results of two different species that have been crossbred to achieve desired traits. It is when entire genes or groups of genes are transferred from one plant or animal species to another. This practice has been around for years, dating back to 1973. A more modern strategy is genome or gene editing, making partial changes to the existing genes in a plant or animal. For example, CRISPR, a variation of molecular synthesis. The organism itself isn't fully altered, but it is slightly adjusted according to information needs. You may think that sounds cool, but just wait. Emerging above them all, the true superhero of modern agriculture, I give you the artificial mini chromosome. Working tremendously harder than its biotech friends, capable of carrying genes, limiting its interruption to other cell organelle, and with astounding results. It is a solution that we have all been searching for. Over the past decade, there has been much discussion over the use of biotechnology in regard to the development of the 11 genetically modified organisms that are currently produced in the United States. Artificial mini chromosomes offer a new approach to the controversial yet beneficial GMOs that are commonly found in many everyday products. The consumer market has grown continually weary of the idea of their food being genetically modified, and are especially fond of the non-GMO food labels. A genetically modified organism is defined as any organism whose genetic material has been altered using genetic engineering techniques, whereas artificial mini chromosomes in no way alter an organism's original genetic makeup. Artificial mini chromosomes provide all the same benefits of GMOs while eliminating concern. Following the genome project, Dr. Daphne Cruz was knee-deep in research at the University of Chicago. One might say that her faith was the size of a mustard seed. You see, it was when researching the genetic makeup of mustard seed that Cruz and her colleagues amassed an amazing phenomenon. They unlocked the key to gene stacking. When most people think of deoxyribonucleic acid, they envision a double helix strand that resembles a spiral. What most don't realize is that a single double-stranded DNA molecule makes up one chromosome. Humans have 23 pairs of chromosomes, 46 total. Plants can consist of anywhere between 8 and 1,400 chromosomes. There are three basic parts that make up a chromosome. Two chromosomes connected by a centromere, and the two telomeres that make up each chromosome. When Bruce and her team identified the centromere, that's when the chromosomes began. Artificial mini chromosomes are built under a microscope and then inserted into an existing DNA strand. Often referred to as small but mighty, the biggest mini chromosomes can carry up to 20 genes. Chromatine, a leading company in the biotech industry, has recently received grants from the National Institute of Standard and Technology's Advanced Technology Program and the National Institute of Health to develop artificial mini chromosomes on a large scale. The first technology to enable the simultaneous introduction of multiple genes into plant cells. The same technology has also been endorsed by the National Science Foundation, the USDA, the US FDA, Bayer, Syngenta, the University of Chicago, and the University of Missouri, as well as various private donors and investors. In the past 22 years, artificial mini chromosome technology has emerged and evolved so much to the point that it is nearly at the fingertips of consumers, making it an achievable practice that will continue to impact the world for many generations to come. Chromatin's proprietary
extraordinary multi-gene mini chromosome techniques can rapidly generate multi-gene clusters designed to ensure stable and consistent gene expression in plant cells. MGMs can decrease time to market for engineered plants by 50% and increase crop yields by 25%. According to AgriTech Tomorrow, the growing population and demand for food mean that farmers will need to increase crop production by at least 23% to maintain our current living standard. Today's agricultural practices suggest a need for a sustainable, achievable, and manageable way to feed the world. Artificial mini chromosomes are a step towards a sustainable future. Not only does artificial mini chromosome technology eliminate the risk of contamination or cross-pollination of crops, but it's also more economically friendly as opposed to herbicides and insecticides. Additionally, it is more consumer and farmer friendly. It is astounding that something so tiny has the potential to make such a difference in the world that we live in today. If we are to continue making leaps and bounds in the agricultural industry, it is vital not only we educate ourselves on these leading edge technologies, but that we inform and communicate with others. To enhance our understanding, we can talk to experts and people who are working every day on a better and brighter farm. The next time you drive by the park and see the little kids running around, sporting their superhero attire, imagine that is your child, grandchild, or nephew. Now imagine a future where parents don't have to worry about the effects of genetically modified foods, or contaminated water sources and soil, lower insulin prices because of the ability to extract it from fat plants, and better medical care because of gene therapy and pharmaceutical discoveries. Sustainable, achievable, and manageable. Artificial mini chromosomes are the key to a happier and healthier future. Thank you.
Nice job, Alyssa.
Thank you.
Let's talk about one of the statements that you made fairly early on. You said that artificial mini chromosomes provide all the same benefits of GMOs while eliminating concern. There's a lot of people in the world of food, marketing and advertising, the whole food people of the world, they don't like anything that has attached to science. How do you make eliminating concern a reality in our society today?
The biggest thing for eliminating concern whenever it comes to food in the consumer market is number one, education. Educating our consumers on just the agricultural production cycle and how our food is made and how it gets to them is a key process of consumers understanding how their food gets to their table. And a lot of concern comes from the news and different people hearing about GMOs and these monster GMOs and thinking about how they're bad and the different side effects that are talked about that are caused by GMOs. But the really cool thing about artificial chromosome technology that really assures me as a consumer is that because scientists are so able to quickly pinpoint in the DNA strand what part of the plant that we want to enhance, the concerns are virtually limitless.
Alyssa, in your research, what would you expect to be one of the first examples of this technology being commercially available to ag producers or consumers ultimately?
So currently, in my research, I found a lot of different trials going on. It's just your basic crops and comparing the different GMO crops, especially the ones such as corn, wheat, cotton, those type of things, to artificial chromosome technology and seeing how the production and the different cycles are comparing. And the numbers for artificial chromosome technology have been excellent. Aside from that, I think on the medical field, from that perspective, artificial chromosomes are going to be huge, especially for patients with different types of diseases that are incurable, such as diabetes. A really cool thing happening right now is artificial chromosomes being used in safflower plants to get them to produce insulin, which would be a key factor in eliminating our insulin shortage in the United States.
Very good. You talked a lot about the plant and the bio of the plant. Are you aware of any of the same type of techniques we use for livestock production?
Well, sir, there's a lot of speculation and research that's about similar ideas from a livestock perspective. For artificial chromosomes specifically, this technology has been specifically lot of undergraduate research in animal science on the perspective of seeing how chromosomes and different factors react in edited animals. So I believe that it is a possibility. However, seeing the yield of production and how rapidly this technology is increasing and how successful it's been, it is my belief that researchers and universities will continue to devote most of their time towards plants, whereas the animal side, if that does emerge, would be a little bit later on once we know more.
You talked a little bit about herbicides and insecticides. Would this technology eliminate the need for all herbicides and insecticides? If so, how?
Yes. So the amazing thing about artificial chromosomes is I talked a little bit in my speech about being able to simultaneously produce multiple genes in the plant cells. So the really cool and unique thing about artificial chromosomes is that unlike GMOs where you're just getting really one big result, is that because scientists are so able to specifically pinpoint on the DNA strand what genetic code they're going to enhance, they can actually use that on multiple different things. So farmers who are struggling with drought resistance on certain crops and other things such as that are used with herbicides and insecticides, which provide a product to provide those battles with those crops. If it's all done underneath the microscope, which it can be, and that's a really cool ability that we have with this technology, it would completely eliminate the use of herbicides.
Since we are editing or adding, I guess, this artificial mini chromosome, what is some of the, I guess, drawbacks scientists have seen, or what are any negative results we've seen using this technology?
So far, there really hasn't been any. So whenever I'm talking about really adding or taking out genes on using artificial chromosomes, it's a little bit different from how it sounds. So what makes artificial chromosome different from CRISPR, which is taking out a section of DNA, is that it's actually looking at the DNA strand and not genetic code that's already in the plant, and it's taking a teeny tiny mini chromosome from one end of that strand and super punching it behind the other. So it's actually the same genetic code that's already in the plant. I don't like to think of it like turbo targeting just because of that extra punch, so that the expression is stronger. Thank you all very much. You may not realize it, but a new supervillain has emerged over the past several years. This villain has struck fear and concern into the hearts and minds of so many global citizens. With its power to change what we purchase, what we grow, and even what we eat. You may be asking yourself, what could be so powerful and capable of causing so much damage and destruction? Believe it or not, the answer for many Americans is bovine irritation. You may know it as burping cattle. Many believe that cattle are ruining our planet with the methane they release from their stomachs, which results in carbon emissions, causing more and more consumers to go meatless. Reportedly, half of the respondents in the nationwide survey indicated that they planned on participating in Meatless Monday campaigns in 2022, with environmental concerns being one of the primary causes. The beef cattle industry has received substantial criticism from a variety of sources for producing greenhouse gases. What is often unclear or poorly communicated is just how much responsibility should be placed on the beef cattle industry for carbon emissions. In order to appropriately address climate change, it is important to investigate and promote reliable scientific evidence to begin work to make more sustainable productivity improvements. The cattle industry has received increased attention from groups interested in mitigating carbon emissions. A 2006 report by the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations incorrectly stated that livestock produced 18% of the world's greenhouse gases, and concluded that livestock were doing more harm to the planet than all forms of transportation. That claim was later shown to be inaccurate, and has since been corrected by the senior author of the report. Conversely, the Environmental Protection Agency noted that agriculture in its entirety contributed 10% to U.S. greenhouse gas emissions. fossil fuels burned for transportation, electricity, and industry, which contributed 29, 25, and 23% respectively. Specifically, animal agriculture represents 3.9% of emissions, and 2% are from cattle production. So even though previous claims about emissions from livestock have not been accurate, the industry continues to receive a disproportionate amount of criticism. Ruminant livestock have a special digestive system that enables them to consume unusable plant materials as a feed source. The first of 4 compartments in the ruminant stomach is the rumen, which is responsible for the breakdown of cellulose materials. The rumen has microbes that produce methane as a byproduct, which is released from the animal through belching. This important process is called enteric fermentation, where the end product includes volatile fatty acids, or VFAs, as well as greenhouse gases. VFAs are absorbed through the walls of the rumen and transported to the liver, where the animal uses them for energy, and methane and carbon dioxide are released. Enteric methane is what cows burn, and it's a highly potent greenhouse gas that is 28 times that of carbon dioxide. Although their carbon footprint may have been previously overstated, cattle are still agriculture's #1 source for greenhouse gases worldwide. Removing beef from our diet through campaigns such as Meatless Mondays has also shown that it may have a limited effect on our climate. A study published in the Proceedings of the National Academies of Science claimed that even if Americans removed all animal proteins from their diets, we would reduce U.S. emissions by only 2.6%. So instead of asking humans to alter their diets, scientists have been investigating ways to alter cattle diets and digestion to reduce emissions. California data scientist Frank Midloner and Ermias Cabral are looking for ways to make cattle more sustainable and less gassy. Forage-based diets consumed by cattle are typically high fiber, so researchers are testing for feed additives that can make digestion more efficient. One successful feed additive is derived from an unlikely source, seaweed. Researchers found that Asparagus taxiformis, or red seaweed, was effective in reducing methane emissions. The seaweed inhibits a certain enzyme in the cow's digestive system, which contributes to methane production. In a 5-month trial, researchers added small amounts of dried and powdered seaweed into the beef cattle's feed. Results showed that while the seaweed-fed cattle gained as much weight as their herd weights, they also worked out 82% less methane. Researchers also conducted a taste test panel and found there to be no difference in the flavor or quality of seaweed-fed steers. Midlander acknowledged that this type of red seaweed used in the study has one big drawback. A wild harvest is unlikely to provide enough of a supply for broad adoption. Other trials and studies are seeking ways to grow the seaweed to scale as a potential feed additive that can be sustainably harvested. Cattle and their burps may not be the actual villains they've been portrayed as, but their influence in our environment is still substantial. Innovations in feed additives, as well as grazing management strategies, show promise as tools along the way to the greater goal of reaching climate neutrality and net zero warming in the beef and dairy industries. As a testament to progress in sustainability, the U.S. cattle herd has shrunk by 1/3 in the last 40 years. Yet, U.S. farmers are producing more beef now than they did in the 1970s. And evidence shows that removing beef from our diet is not the answer to end carbon emissions. As they have done for decades, agriculture scientists will work with producers to address sustainability issues that will lead to the best possible outcomes. Thank you.
Gianna, I'll start with questions. Can you talk more about the research that you mentioned? Do you know what types of cattle were researched, or were there any other effects on their health or production that were noted in the studies?
So 21 steers are going to be what's used for the initial lab testing before all of the field trials. And they were separated into 4 separate groups and fed those 4 snacks a day in resin boxes that are connected to something called a GMP 100, which measures the levels of methane they produce. There was not shown to be any significant difference in the quality of the meat or the quality of the milk. The only difference seen in cattle is that there's going to be low levels of the bromoform from the seaweed present in milk produced. However, they're well below FDA standards, and the seaweed actually also helps to add in essential vitamins and nutrients into the milk as well.
I don't have a question. Thank you.
Are there certain types of feeds or feedstuffs that produce more methane than others?
From my research, I determined that grain finishing had a larger environmental impact than grass-fed beef. However, I also noted that grain finishing helps us produce cattle quicker than traditional grass-fed cattle. And because of that, we are actually lowering the emissions they produce over their lifetime. So while there's not a lot of research comparing the emissions from grain-fed, grass-fed finished cattle, it is shown that there might be no significant difference between the two, which is why I personally believe that this seaweed typically used in a grain-fed feedlot is going to really impact our cattle industry.
Aside from seaweed, is there anything maybe more practical that they're also researching that could reduce greenhouse gas emissions?
Yes, there's one product on the market right now called Bromine, and it's actually currently being sold as a drug determined by the FDA, and it does have an impact on methane reduction. It does help to reduce methane by 42% in beef cattle and then 35% in dairy cattle. However, that is nowhere near touching the 82% of Asparagopsis saxiformis. This product is going to be made up of a bioalcohol similar to ethanol, and it's also going to contain nitrates, which fight the methane in the cow's rumen, but don't target the microbes that produce the methane originally, like Asparagopsis saxiformis. So it's not really the proactive solution that this industry has been searching for.
This concept of less gassy cattle, how close are we really to being economically feasible to make this a widespread part of our beef and dairy industry?
As of right now, the only state in the U.S. that has adopted this is California, for a few different reasons, mainly because they produce so many dairy cattle and they're trying to lower their emissions, but also because the system has shown to work wonders over there. They have the ocean climates that can produce the seaweed, and just the implementation of the seaweed alone over the past few years has lowered emissions from dairy farms an average of 25% from dairy to dairy. In the rest of the U.S., I don't believe this is something that's going to be applicable to rangeland grazing operations in Oklahoma. I think the real way we can get Asparagopsis saxiformis to make the biggest difference is by targeting companies. Companies such as Starbucks, Ben & Jerry's, and Burger King have all actually donated money to try to get this off the ground because they are interested in reducing their emissions. And as I've said before, it does show great promise. Methane is also going to be a short-term greenhouse gas, meaning that if we implement this, in 10 to 12 years, we could see a complete reduction in methane in our atmosphere.
Are there environmental concerns associated with the production of this seaweed product, like water use or other things that we should be concerned about?
Yes, there are two main production ways to produce the Asparagopsis saxiformis. Either growing it in ocean waters near Australia or Hawaii and collecting them by hand with something called tubular nets, or, which they mainly conduct for research, making man-made ponds in the middle of landlocked states such as Oklahoma, and heating them and lighting them to kind of manipulate those tropical surroundings. The only issue with that, of course, is going to be the amount of power needed to simulate those surroundings. There's also a concern that by planting Asparagopsis saxiformis in places it's not usually grown, there can be issues with biodiversity and disturbing the natural habitats. However, Asparagopsis saxiformis is actually very efficient in photosynthesizing. So it's shown that it can balance out the acidity in ocean waters, and it can help sequester some of that excess carbon from the waters as well. Thank you.
I am here today with the sole purpose
of informing you of the dangers we face each and every day. There are people in this world who do not like us and want to eliminate or hurt us, but most assuredly, control us. Believe me, they are out there. Just turn on your TVs, computers, read the newspaper, and you will quickly see the hurt and fear that they are creating daily. We can see the treacherous deeds that are happening in our country. Destructive as these vicious attacks are, there is a danger far more destructive and harmful to we the people of the United States. It goes under the heading of agri-terrorism. Agri-terrorism is a type of bioterrorism used to attack an element of a nation's agriculture, with the primary goal of causing economic disruption, hardship, and fear. The goal of agri-terrorism is largely economic, but the fear caused in the public is a goal as well. The first hit of agri-terrorism being deployed on American soil was in 2002, when United States Navy SEAL Team 3 stormed a cluster of caves in eastern Afghanistan. It was a known Al-Qaeda storehouse. They expected guns, explosives, maybe even Osama bin Laden. Instead, the team found hundreds of USDA documents, all planning a terrorist attack on the United States' food supply. There was a comprehensive list of the most devastating livestock pathogens: foot and mouth disease, hog cholera, and rinder pests. There was a separate rundown of crop diseases like soybean rust and rice blight. But most alarming, there were training documents detailing how to deploy these pathogens on farms. Shortly after that, on February 3, 2004, President George W. Bush implemented the Homeland Security Presidential Directive 9. This policy was put in place to help protect against terrorist attacks on our agriculture and food systems. The U.S. enjoys a safe, abundant, and inexpensive food supply. The same factors that yield inexpensive and plentiful food by promoting maximum production efficiency makes American agricultural systems inherently vulnerable. Americans spend only 11% of their income on food, compared to the global average of 20 to 30%. As many as 1 in 6 jobs are linked to agriculture, a $1 trillion industry. Agriculture-related food products comprise nearly 10% of all U.S. exports, amounting to nearly $68 billion. The United States Department of Agriculture reports that the cash receipts for livestock, poultry, and crops exceed $200 billion annually. The deliberate introduction of the pathogen into the U.S. livestock, poultry, and crop industries could easily cause a disease outbreak that would be devastating, resulting in loss of livestock, disruption of animal agriculture, and decreased food production. A widespread attack on agriculture would affect us all, no matter where we live or work. An agri-terrorism event would likely result in travel restrictions on humans and animals. The impact on banks, supply houses, the transportation industry, as well as landowners could be disastrous. The impact on animals would not be limited to farm animals. Innocent household pets, as well as wild animals, would also fall victim to this attack, and to public health response dictated by such an event. If pathogens were used, some are zoonotic, meaning transferable between humans and animals, and some are not. There is an incentive for terrorists to use non-zoonotic pathogens because attackers would not have to worry about infecting themselves. The highly concentrated and intensive nature of livestock production encourages the rapid spread of contagious pathogens. Take the cattle food box, with some having over 150,000 head capacity, which mark it over 40% of the fed cattle alone. The introduction of a deadly pathogen, such as foot and mouth disease, within this number of beef animals would cause an economic disaster. It would require a mass slaughter and enormous disposal efforts of infected animals. An outbreak of this magnitude could halt the domestic and international sale of meat and meat products for years. For example, in 2001, an outbreak of foot and mouth disease in the United Kingdom
affecting 9,000 farms and required the destruction of more than 4 million animals. Researchers believe that a similar outbreak in the US could cost taxpayers billions of dollars. A foot and mouth attack could result in massive herd harm, the need to destroy processed goods, and extensive decontamination efforts of production and livestock containment facilities. If terrorists strive for human deaths, the food production and distribution chain offers a low-tech but effective mechanism. Because terrorists rely on a lack of preparedness, every level of the food chain, including farms, feedlots, chemical storage facilities, meat packing plants, and distribution operations, remain vulnerable to agri-terrorism. The fact that a single, determined individual or small group could bring all U.S. animal and animal product exports to a halt underscores the need for increased defense against this threat. In addition, animals concentrated in fewer production facilities and with the frequent transportation of animals among these facilities, a single pathogen introduction could cause a widespread infection very rapidly. An outbreak of a foreign disease could prompt the international community to impose export restrictions on U.S. agricultural goods, resulting in severe financial losses for U.S. producers. The public reaction to an agri-terrorist attack may further amplify these financial losses. Agri-terrorism will always remain a threat to the United States of America because we are the most diversified and largest producers of agricultural products in the world. With the future of progressive agriculture, new technologies will be the frontline defense in our battle for a better world. Agri-terrorism is now under our spotlight, and we all must give our most strict attentiveness in order to prevent treacherous attacks on our fellow countrymen. With more rising attention from national governments, it is becoming less of a danger to our national lives. Therefore, fellow agriculturalists and FFA members, it is our turn to exert an influence in our homes and communities in order to keep American agriculture strong, vibrant, extremely productive, as well as safe.
What do you see as the greatest threat possible out there for the bringing in of one of these animal diseases, either by accident or by a deliberate terrorist attack? Where do you see our most vulnerable places?
So our most vulnerable places, I feel, are our crops, because the majority of our crops are kept outside. Unlike our livestock, yes, they are outside, but they can go into barns and find shelter there. And with our crops, they're wide open, so something could come in and drop down on our crops, and that's how we can contaminate our crops. But also within our livestock, a big problem with pathogens and the risk of spreading is through saliva and contamination of surfaces.
I'd like to hear a little bit more about the policy addressing agri-terrorism. So explain the Homeland Security Presidential Directive 9 and any other legislative effects to help prevent agri-terrorism.
So that was put in place because of the 9/11 attacks. And with that, it just states that we will do everything that we can, the 18 agencies on the national level, and then the 5 agencies here in Oklahoma that work alongside the USDA to help protect against these attacks and prevent them from happening.
Can you explain to me maybe what the most recent, or if there has been any recent agri-terrorism attacks or threats?
So we have not had a direct hit on our agriculture. But with that being said, we have had an indirect hit. Some people may say COVID was an indirect hit. And it was, because it prevented a lot of stuff from getting from farm to table, and therefore it slowed that down.
You alluded to the fact that there's also potential of human deaths. You mentioned that, and you're actually talking foot and mouth disease, which really isn't a directly human problem, but yet economically it is. How would human deaths come into the equation if terrorists wanted to do that?
So, like I said, they would have to use a zoonotic pathogen. And with that, there are some zoonotic pathogens. avian bird flu, that is a zoonotic pathogen, as well as the swine flu, which is also H1N1. And they can get, humans like us can get contaminated by our animals and through our livestock. So with that, we do need to take precautionary biosecurity methods to help prevent us from getting sick.
You mentioned biosecurity. What's the number one thing that you think ag producers and the ag industry as a whole can do to protect our industry and our nation from this type of attack?
So there's actually a campaign that's going on, and it's called Animal Disease Coordinated Agriculture Process, I think. But it's where they're using the youth, and they're informing the youth of the biosecurity. And they call this the trickle-up method. And with this, they're hoping that the youth, by informing them, will then trickle up to the adults. And then through that, they will help take precautionary measures. I mean, OIE, they released a lot of videos with some of their members presenting about biosecurity and talking about it.
Talk a little bit about technology maybe being a way to battle this bioterrorism. Do you have any examples of that?
So drones, that people can use drones to fly out over their crop fields and their feedlots to check. There's also cattle tracking devices as well as 840 tags that will link back to the owner of that animal and where that animal came from.
So you talked about maybe some effects that could happen in case of a disease outbreak. Are there any protocols in place by USDA that would take effect in the event of an agri-terrorism situation?
So if you have an outbreak on your farm, you should notify your local USDA, and therefore they could bring in the federal USDA, but they would bring in people that stay on your farm for 60 days to help monitor and regulate and give treatments that need to be treated.
What can Oklahoma ag producers do to decrease the threat of agri-terrorism?
Good biosecurity methods, so cleaning things, wearing the right garments. Like for me, I show pigs, and I make sure that I wear the right shoes to the barn, and I only wear those shoes to the barn. And I won't wear them anywhere else because I don't want to contaminate someone else's pigs or bring something home to mine.
Your references was a study about agri-tourism. They asked the question, why we are not ready, or they made the statement, why we're not ready. Do you think we're ready at this point to be able to handle some of these issues that came our way?
I think we are becoming more ready because this threat can become more prevalent. And with that, more people are learning about this. And we have to continue to inform the public so therefore they can continue to make the right choices to help protect them and their farms.
It doesn't matter if you're a basketball fanatic, a sports fan in general, or you could not care less about sports. Everyone has likely heard of one of the world's most heated sports debates. Who is the greatest basketball player of all time? Whether you believe Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, LeBron James, or any other players at best, there are always certain criteria that come up in the GOAT debate. It might be MJ's killer mid-range game, Kobe's Mamba mentality, or even Steph's unbelievable three-point shooting. Still, all of these pale in comparison to what I believe to be the most remarkable feat in NBA history, the incredible longevity throughout the career of LeBron James. LeBron has been in the league for 20 seasons, where he has dominated the court, averaging 27 points, 7 rebounds, and 7 assists. Throughout his career, he has also won 4 MVPs, 4 championships, 4 finals MVPs, and has been selected to 18 All-Star games and 13 All-NBA first teams. LeBron's longevity has solidified himself as one of, if not the greatest basketball player of all time. And he even became the NBA's all-time leading scorer just this season. In the agriculture industry, longevity also equates to value. And today, researchers are constantly working to identify solutions which may enhance our industry's ability to feed the world for generations to come. A recent development in the food science sector has increased focus on further extending the shelf life of food, especially beef. Shelf life is the period of time a product is deemed usable, sellable, or fit for consumption, and is one of the most important topics when discussing beef products. Even though the beef industry in the United States is worth over $165 billion, we have still not been able to significantly increase the shelf life of these products. Because of the short shelf life, 20% of all beef products in the United States are wasted each year, which equates to over $33 billion lost annually. Along with the major loss on the economic side, the substantial loss of beef products certainly affects our mission of providing the world with the safest and most abundant food supply possible. It is commonly noted how the world's population is expected to reach 9.8 billion people by the year 2050. Many are quick to point out the need to produce more in order to account for this influx of population. And that is true. But I believe it is equally as important to preserve and extend product shelf life and help reduce significant waste that occurs in products such as beef. Most of this waste occurs right in the grocery store. As consumers enter the meat aisle, they gravitate towards the bright, cherry red cuts. This often leaves the more brown, less desirable cuts to sit on the shelves waiting to be thrown away. 428 million pounds of beef is discarded annually due to discoloration alone, which amounts to over $3.73 billion lost. But why does beef turn brown? As the beef sits on the shelves, it undergoes lipid oxidation. Lipids are important components of all types of meat and are responsible for many of the desirable characteristics that we all love. When oxygen comes into contact with these lipids, they begin to deteriorate, affecting beef's color, texture, taste, and aroma. This deterioration causes many off flavors and unacceptable tastes, which are the main reasons for consumer rejection. Obviously, this is a huge problem, but there are a few different ways that we can fix it, such as modified atmospheric packaging, which is the process where the air inside the beef's package is replaced with a mixture of gases such as carbon dioxide, nitrogen, and oxygen, which can extend the shelf life of a food product. Or irradiation, which uses ionizing radiation to kill harmful microorganisms and bacteria that speed up the oxidation process of meats. But I believe the most effective way to prolong the shelf life of beef on a large scale would be to introduce the beef to natural antioxidants. Traditionally, manufacturers use synthetic antioxidants in their products. But in recent years, the focus has shifted off these synthetic antioxidants and onto their natural counterparts due to the rising health concerns of synthetic antioxidants and the drive to become more natural. Natural antioxidants are extracts that can originate from plants, herbs, and spices. These extracts contain high levels of antioxidants that can slow down the lipid oxidation process of beef when added. There are many studies that show the success of natural antioxidants on preventing lipid oxidation, and I have even seen it with my own eyes, as for the past 3 years, my FFA agri-science fair projects have revolved around these antioxidants. I've been conducting research on how natural antioxidants affect the color and quality of ground beef, as well as the consumer acceptability of these antioxidants. My research, along with many others, have found that natural antioxidants can improve the color of beef, which in turn prolong their shelf life without exhibiting any off flavors or off textures. My research also indicated that by using natural antioxidants on a large scale and extending shelf life by just one more day, we could save over $373 million annually. So now the major question is, why haven't we already started using these natural antioxidants on a large industrial scale? Well, there are a few different reasons. The first is that more research still needs to be conducted on natural antioxidants to know everything about them. Also, implementing natural antioxidants on a large scale might be more expensive than what the current synthetic antioxidants cost. Even though these challenges exist, research is still being conducted on natural antioxidants. Calsec, the leading producer of natural extracts, says that they are innovating the area of natural antioxidants. The CEO of Calsec, Scott Nykaza, says that this concept is heavily based on rosemary, which they have engineered to give all of its antioxidants to beef without providing any off taste or smell. Calsec's next step in the antioxidant industry is to fully replace the use of synthetic antioxidants in their products. They want to shift from using synthetic antioxidants, which have limits to their capabilities and provide health risks, to natural antioxidants, which are environmentally friendly, more effective, and provide a cleaner product for consumers. If this new method were to be adopted industry-wide, the impact would be unbelievable, producing a cleaner and safer product that reduces the amount of waste and therefore money lost. Sounds like the ultimate and one to me. Since the NBA was first founded in 1946, the league has drastically changed. And over time, the game, players, and market have all had to evolve in order to survive. Our agriculture industry is no different. E.M. Tiffany said it best as he wrote in his belief in the future of agriculture and the promise of better days through better ways. Just as LeBron James has stood the test of time, and his longevity has solidified his legacy as one of the greatest basketball players of all time, research is on the brink of a breakthrough by extending the shelf life of beef. While we all may debate if the GOAT is in basketball, I believe we would all agree that reducing waste, saving money, and ensuring a safer and more abundant food supply for future generations would be a slam dunk. Thank you.
You talked about health concerns and health risks of synthetic antioxidants. Can you explain those?
So synthetic antioxidants have been known to cause lung cancer in some consumers. So in some cases, when those consumers eat products that are synthetic with synthetic antioxidant in them, they have been known to cause lung cancer, which is why we want to move to natural antioxidants more.
How far are we off from using natural antioxidants?
So right now, we know that natural antioxidants are beneficial to improving the color. We know their impacts, which are substantial. But right now, what we're looking on is the downsides. Is there any downsides to using those, any health risks like synthetic antioxidants? We just have to do more research to figure out everything we know of these antioxidants. So I'd say within the next 5 to 10 years, we will be able to use these natural antioxidants on a large scale because we will have that research to know everything about them.
Now, fixing the problem, as you talked about, does include this idea of convincing the consumer that it is not detrimental, it's safe. Obviously, you're talking about research, but how do you include the consumer into making this a successful fix?
So in my research this year, I implemented consumer acceptability tests. So I introduced the antioxidants to the beef, actually performed consumer tests where they visually evaluated the patties as well as consumed the patties and evaluated them on taste, off flavor, and things like that. And my research was extraordinary. They did not find any off flavors in those antioxidant treatments, and actually preferred that natural antioxidant treatments taste to the regular patty. So that means if we were able to implement these natural antioxidants on a large scale, there'd really be no consumer setback because it doesn't change the flavor or the tenderness of that beef at all, and it actually improves it.
What is the process of treating the beef product with these antioxidants, and how would that work on a commercial scale?
So right now, these extracts are in liquid form, so you mix them with the ground beef in the grinder, and that's how they're introduced to that ground beef. But if we're looking at this on a cut of beef, you would be able to spray that using a sprayer, that type of technology, spray on the cuts, and it will do the exact same thing as it does while it's ground. So if we're able to implement these in manufacturing plants, they would be either introduced as a liquid form in the meat grinder or in liquid form in sprayers.
Two questions. How did you come up with LeBron over Michael Jordan in your basketball analogy?
So Michael Jordan is obviously an incredible player. I did not see him get to play. I did not get to see his era of basketball. But I have grown up watching LeBron James, and his longevity is unmatched. No other player has been in the league for 20 years and done the things he has done, which correlates with my research and antioxidants, and they go together.
So you talked about it was a significant number on just the waste of beef. What can retailers do right now in order to maybe change practices to maintain on the shelf longer?
Right now, we just need to talk to consumers. Because when consumers see discolored meat, they think it's gone rancid, they think it's gone bad, they want to throw it away. But in reality, that color has nothing to do with its taste or anything like that. So when it discolors, you can still eat it, it's going to be completely fine. We just have to relay that to the consumers and have that be known on a large scale. But people will still see that discoloration as a bad sign, and therefore we still need to be able to implement these natural antioxidants or any other treatment into beef.
Is there much of a cost difference for like a packer or like the producer to use a natural antioxidant as compared to using the synthetic ones? And what is that like?
That's a great question. That's a question that I have had many times. Because obviously money is extremely important, and if it's more expensive, we probably wouldn't be able to do it. But right now, there's no information on how much synthetic antioxidants cost on a large scale and the difference between that and natural antioxidants. So that is where my research would like to improve going forward. I'd like to look more on the economic scale and see how beneficial to use natural antioxidants would be. But right now, I believe the price would actually decrease. Because when we look at it on a large scale, I believe natural antioxidants will be cheaper than synthetic antioxidants that have to be artificially made in the lab compared to just being grown in the ground.
You mentioned you get one extra day utilizing those natural antioxidants. It's $373 million saving, $3.7 billion is what you talk about for total beef loss. How do you get to day 2 or day 3? In other words, can you push it with this natural solution?
So in my research, I found that natural antioxidants can prolong the shelf life by multiple days. That one day was just the baseline. We can save $373 million just by increasing that one day. But if we go on to 2 days, we can save over $420 million. But right now, we're just looking at one day because that is the most feasible, that's the most reliable day to put a mark on.